Welcome back to our series on, well, let's just call it RuneQuest. This installment deals with mechanics more than anything else. We'll be looking at two things that I feel are going to be very important in determining the overall feel and experience of the world that I'd like to create. The first aspect of this is adjudicating percentile rolls, which is basically adjudicating a pass-fail roll. Now, while RuneQuest does have critical success and critical failure, most of the time you'll be rolling to succeed or discovering that you have not succeeded. So the interpretation of rolls is slightly different than the experience you get when using a die pool system or a system based on differentiated levels of success. So we'll be talking about that. Connected to this, we'll be looking at combat. RuneQuest has a reputation for being both realistic and lethal. We'll take a quick look at why that is and why I desire that for this campaign and the setting I'm building to support it. Many aspects of RuneQuest are governed by percentile rolls. And what that really means is that much of this game boils down to a pass or fail condition on the dice. Now, while the system does support auto failure, auto success, critical success, the majority of rolls are going to lie in the simple pass or fail range, which can create an adjudication problem for the game master, mainly because of psychology. Now, while all the players around the table can understand the fact they've got a 65% chance to succeed, or an 80% chance to succeed, or a 30% chance to succeed, for many people it matters if they just hit that target number, or if they just missed by one. This has an effect on gameplay. Coming up with a distinct style and the ability to think on your feet with a pass-fail mechanic is important. Now, a lot of games have this mechanic, although a lot of games also have graduated degrees of success. If someone has a 65% chance to succeed, they feel good if they roll a 64, and they feel cheated if they roll 66. Being aware of this is important. Now, I chose RuneQuest for a reason. I like this kind of environment. I like being able to riff on the moods and emotions of the people around my table. All I really care about as a person, as a player, and as a game master is pass-fail, honestly. But I do enjoy the ability to tweak that mood by capitalizing on the reactions to the die rolls. And I feel that nothing makes these reactions more obvious than percentile dice. So that was one reason why I considered it. As we go into combat, as we go into thinking about combat, RuneQuest has this reputation of lethality. One of the reasons for this is hit points. Now, RuneQuest 6 doesn't have hit points per se. It has hit points per location, which I like quite a bit. Each area has its own effect, and as combat goes on, a variety of different effects can be accrued. So what I like about this is that even though long ago, when I was playing games that didn't have hit locations and didn't have rules for massive injury and were really nothing more than the decrease of hit points to 0 and then death, I wanted to be able to articulate scarring, permanent injury, maiming, that sort of thing. And RuneQuest is one of those systems that goes in that direction. Now, I might have my own ideas about how to represent this in a game, and with players that know me and trust me and that I know and trust, we can get into these sorts of injuries through pure roleplay. And this is something that goes on when we play Ubiquity. They know me, I know them, and even though the game system doesn't deal with things like scarring or maiming or dismemberment, we can roleplay it. But where this game is going to be played primarily with strangers and possibly over the internet, it's important to have an established rule set that anybody can obtain and read without needing to interpret it or wonder about house rules. Having simple, clearly defined rules for interesting injury and lethal combat is therefore important to me. Now, in RuneQuest, the game is lethal because characters are given a certain amount of hit points based on their characteristics at the beginning of play. And unless those characteristics, their attributes, change, the hit points remain the same. There are no levels in RuneQuest. So the character that you start with, and then the number of hit points that you start with, barring permanent injury, will remain constant. Characters have a healing rate, and there's a system for minor and major wounds, which heal differently. Intriguing? Yes. Your character does not become harder to kill as they grow more experienced, simply as a virtue of more experience. They only become harder to kill by increasing the skills that help them become more lethal themselves and more able to defend themselves. And this I like a lot. As reviews you may have heard will have detailed, another interesting aspect to combat in RuneQuest is that the need to specialize in long lists of weapons has been removed. Instead, they have what's called combat styles. And these are the combination of culture and occupation, which really make things easier on the bookkeeping. So, if during the development of this campaign it is determined that something like knights in shining armor were required, we could very easily come up with a combat style that would cover all the things that a knight is supposed to be able to do in combat, and not have to worry about defining distinct proficiencies for each and every weapon that comes down the pike. And that will be very valuable in terms of getting characters ready to go and getting players ready to run them very quickly and easily. And a lot of that can be said about most of RuneQuest, even the passions, which we'll be getting to later. As you can see, the character sheet is quite simple. This is the full sheet. There is another page, but this is what you need for your character. And everything is on it, which is nice. We have the list of standard skills here, complete with how the base percentage score is defined. And what I really like about RuneQuest is that they have taken a house rule that I made up for my own games a million years ago and have encoded it in this game. And it's really nice to see that someone else thought that this was a good idea. Essentially, the base percentage chance for the skills is determined by combining two attributes together. So in the case of athletics, your strength score plus your dex score equals your initial base percentage chance. Nice and easy. Combat styles are strength and dex. Now, RuneQuest does feel that strength is important in combat, and then while I have gone on record as saying I don't think that strength is important in that way, strength is an element of endurance in this game, and so I can let it slide. So strength and dex forming the base for combat styles. Now you can see the little figure, which includes a section for armor points and hit points in each section. Another very attractive element of the game is the inclusion of fatigue. And Ever since the first game that I played that included fatigue, I've found it very difficult to play without it. It's such an excellent concept. And fatigue in RuneQuest will definitely be a part of life, and its effects will be felt. In combat situations, the RuneQuest rules, of course, like all game systems, get even more refined. So we talked earlier about rolls being pass-fail, but there's a chance for automatic failure and automatic success, plus critical successes. Well, in combat, the difference between the attacker's roll and the defender's roll, should these differences yield interesting results, like I get a critical success and you fumble, results in special effects. And these special effects are one of the many reasons why RuneQuest shines, as they were developed to provide a more realistic feel to the progression of combat, rather than just be cool or funny or whatever. So you might compel the opponent to surrender, or a more typical effect like knockback or knockdown or disarmament or dismemberment or something like that. So armor is taken into effect very intelligently, and of course you can armor different parts of your body in different ways, which, when this appears in a system, is something that I really appreciate, rather than a general all-encompassing armor effect, or having to determine on the fly if armor applies to this hit or not. It's always nice when the system just supports it right out of the gate and provides you an easy way to deal with it, which RuneQuest does. Now, RuneQuest combat does take time to get used to. Trying to choose which special effect you've earned is one aspect of it. Reacting to modifiers, remembering what bonuses apply if you're fighting in a situation that's advantageous for your combat style, such as if our previously mentioned Knight in Shining Armor style might gain a bonus for horse-mounted, lance-bearing, all guns blazing, charging combat. But they might not get that in a tavern brawl, for example. Knowing how all of these things work together, being aware of action points, it does take some getting used to. And we'll be getting into this later on, once we've actually determined what kind of combats and what kind of fighting styles the cultures in this campaign will have. Next installment in the series, we'll take a look at culture, cultural conflicts, and the starting point for the campaign. How are we going to bring these different cultures together, and what should these cultures be?